Good morning, everyone. Welcome to Admiral Markets today. We're going to take a look at the charts and price action in just a second. First of all, the PowerPoint, of course, as always, explaining the disclaimer here. The online material is developed for a global audience. Please take into consideration that the info in this session may not be suitable for everyone. To get the corresponding information on charting conditions and other details, please take a look at admiralmarketsglobal.com. Select your country of residence and contact an appropriate entity. Also, trading for exchange and global financial markets is considered very high risk and may not be suitable for all investors. Please seek the advice of an independent financial advisor for more information on that. And this webinar is for informational and educational purposes only. By continuing watching this webinar, you agree with the disclaimer and the content mentioned here and on the terms and conditions of the website. So we thank you for your attention on that. Now we can move on. Today's topic is going to be trend lines. Trend lines, a bit of a caution before we actually use trend lines, is not always can we use trend lines, in the sense that although we're discussing trend line trading, sometimes there's just not a trend line that would qualify or would be logical or would meet certain criteria, which we would discuss in a second. So, trend lines are very useful, but not always can we use trend lines. That's a bit of the disadvantage of trend lines. That's one of the advantages of moving averages, because they will always have a certain level on the chart. Sometimes the market is not providing a certain pattern, a certain market structure that would allow a trader to necessarily put a trend line. Now, in most cases, I would say there's always some line to be drawn. But in some cases, we just don't have a line that connects multiple points. So then, of course, it doesn't make sense to use a trend line. So although the topic is trend line trading, it is just a part of the arsenal, of course, when looking at currencies and at price. So just let you know that in events. Let's see. So otherwise, we're going to be talking about these steps, basically. What is the trend? What is the opportunity? If there are any filters, what is the trigger? And deciding how to enter using trend lines, but also fibs and moving averages and Camarilla, for instance. All right, don't forget to take a look at Admiral Markets in social media. And otherwise, let's take a look at the calendar. Today we have pound manufacturing production at 1 hour 42. So we can analyze the pound, but it will be difficult to trade it beforehand. And 1 second, folks, as I try to open my drawing tool here. All right. Otherwise, today, some lighter Euro news throughout the day and some lighter U.S. news. Tomorrow, we do have a New Zealand interest rate decision, so that's something that could rock the market. Alrighty. Husam, thank you for your questions. Let's see. I will first take a look at our normal trading, and then we can dive into some questions like what you're asking about volume. Not sure what you mean with W and numbers on the chart. So can you clarify what you mean with your second question, maybe? Then I'll get back to you when there's a bit more time left and we've looked through the current analysis, okay? So with that said, let's take a look now at our charts. We've looked at the calendar, so it's time to move on and take a look at the charts now. I'm going to just think which template could be the best for this webinar. Maybe we can leave it like this. There will be other things on the chart. I hope you don't mind. We'll try to focus on trend lines as much as we can. Alrighty, let's take a look at the euro dollar. Euro dollar on Thursday had an interest rate decrease, had a downside on the euro dollar, but then moved up a lot, in fact, on that Thursday. And Friday, the NFP day was basically a bit flattish, ups and downs, but nothing really that disastrous in action. So if we look at the daily chart, what do we see here? We see a bullish engulfing twin on Thursday. So obviously that's a big signal regarding the potential for a reversal back to the upside. The momentum is to the downside on this daily, if you look at the moving averages. But we do have bullish price action. Now, yesterday we did have our Harami, but I wouldn't necessarily say that there could be a reversal back down. So it's a bit maybe in a no man's zone. In that regard, maybe euro dollar is not the best one to trade. But looking at that big outside bar, big engulfing bar, I think that there's a decent chance of upside now. If you look at the weekly too, we got a weekly pin bar with a bullish close and a big wick at the bottom. This downside looks to me more like a retracement for more upside than anything else. Now I might be wrong, but then really the weekly low would have to break. Otherwise, I would be quite, let me say it this way, scared to trade it too close to this support level. So in my opinion, if we fib the breakout here, put a fib on this breakout like that, then we were right at the 50 fib. Or if you do it like that, price is bouncing off the 50 fib. So to me, this looks more like a retracement for more upside than a lot of potential for downside, if you see what I mean. Just based on the daily and weekly candles. My bias is more bullish despite the downside momentum. Now another thing that aids the fact for more upside is the fact that we've had already a lot of divergence between these bottoms. These bottoms right in here compared to these bottoms right in here on the oscillator. Obviously there's a mismatch between those and we got clear divergence. And we also broke out of this downtrend line. As you can see, price broke through it right here. Sorry. Somehow my drawing tool is not working. Maybe I didn't activate it properly. 1 second. Okay, now it's working. So here we have a bit of a breakout there where the green circle is. Right there. So in that regard, I'm more bullishly aligned. So in that regard too, I think this is a good retracement potential. And if I see 50-minute charts showing some good momentum, for instance, that could be good trades to the upside. Now we do have daily and weekly and H3 levels right in front of it. So in that regard, I think it's a bit too early. If you trade at the 50 fib, that's not even that bad, right? Because you're already in the trade and going our way. However, if you didn't trade it, I wouldn't be looking for it now because we're too close to these resistances. I would like to see a break, pullback, and then take it on the pullback or continuation. That makes more sense to me. So that's my trade plan for today. Wait for that break and pullback. And otherwise, downside, maybe if we break through these bottoms, there could be some smaller downside to, for instance, the lower fib. I lost the fib somehow, but let me put it back up. Like that. So what we could see maybe is if we break these bottoms, we could see a fall down to the 61.8. Well, that's actually very small space, so I wouldn't trade it to the downside. Unless if we really push below L3, maybe down to the 78.6 fib. This space right in here. Oh, this space right there. Small space to the downside. Otherwise, I would rather wait for the break, pull back, and go. That's about it on the euro dollar. I don't have anything else to add. If you have questions, of course, please let me know. Otherwise, I hope that everything is clear and we can move on to a new pair. I don't want to stay too long on one pair necessarily. But this is what I envision right here with the euro dollar is the bullish rebound. Either trading, you can either trade it you can trade the rebound or the bounce, let me say it this way. If not, then now we have to wait for the break and pull back because we're too close to those resistances. So. Otherwise, I don't think there's anything else from my side that I want to add. So let's move over to pound dollar. Euro dollar looks pretty clear in my opinion. Pound dollar is maybe a bit more mixture of things. We are, first of all, still right at that resistance line, or channel, in fact. So in that regard, price could be fighting against that resistance. But if you look at the pivots, they're all actually intertwined with each other. The monthly, the daily, the weekly, very close to each other, and price is in between those. So to me, this is looking more like a neutral position for the pound dollar, with not really, looking at the pivot point of view, not really a clear directional guidance at the moment. Price is still within the H3 and L3, or try to break above the H3, in fact, at the moment. We actually had an attempt to break out. Do you see that? This wick here? But look at that bearish close. That does not, as always, we have these breaks on the pound dollar at the beginning of London and the European session that don't tend to get a lot of follow through. In most cases, we do see some ups and downs. So that's not maybe so surprising, but it doesn't inspire bulls that much, does it? Nor does it bears, in my opinion, because it's still bullish momentum on the 15. So the pound dollar doesn't really look interesting at all currently, because it's mixed up with those pivots. It has upside momentum, but it's fighting against a very strong resistance line. So it's going to be interesting to see if price will be able to break. Actually, the only trades that I do think are interesting are a break of the orange line to the upside. Then this is looking like a bull flag, in fact, for the upside. Something like this, right? Where you have upside momentum followed by slow correction downside, followed by a breakout to the upside. Something like this makes sense. Or if we don't break to the upside, but actually start breaking below this weekly pivot, then things were to change, because then we have all the pivots above us, and then of course things are looking more bearish. So that would be the alternative. If we break through the weekly pivot point, we're also breaking through two daily lows right at each other, in fact the same level. So if we break through 167.80, there could be some good downside to follow, and then it's looking more bearish. So that would be my trigger, a break of that line. Not necessarily an entry right away, but it could be a trigger. Same for the break of 168.30 and the trend line to the upside. Those two levels, I think, are the lines in the sand to see whether the bulls or bears are in control. Not that I would jump in a trade or enter right away at that level, but it would be my trigger that I start to become interested in one of those two sides. If they don't break those levels, then I'm not interested in trading it to either side. All right, let's move on. If you have questions, as always, let me know. Otherwise, I think that I don't see anything else to discuss. So it will be maybe interesting to keep an eye on this 4-hour chart, by the way, because we do have a shooting star at the monthly pivot, but the only disadvantage is the daily and the weekly are so close to each other. AUD USD. Daily charts. Let's see. It's actually trying to get some bullish momentum at the moment, the Aussie here. We had a very bearish week here, so it was easy to see a lot of momentum to the downside of that candle. I'm a bit surprised by 2 weeks of follow through to the upside already. So we'll have to see if how price reacts to this top. If we break that top, we could have a break to the upside. If not, whether price then can break through this bottom, because those would be the lines that I'm looking for a breakout to one way or the other. 92 or 94, relatively tight range at the moment. Price is getting close to that top. So let's see how far it can continue. This is the hourly. Looks like a shooting star, but momentum is to the upside. That shooting star could be maybe an interesting signal, but at the moment that shooting star is not occurring at a level that I would say is a fantastic resistance. It's pretty close to the R2, daily R2, but still missed it by a bit, so I would still be cautious. It's not a great place for that shooting star. So I'm not that enthusiastic at the moment for either up or downside. Downside because of the reversal and just missed the resistance. Upside because we had that shooting star, so that makes it also less interesting from an hourly perspective. Let me take a look and see if I'm missing anything. Not that I see. The daily, of course, the daily pivot here could be support again. If price gets there, we see price action, clues that price is bouncing at that daily pivot. That could make sense to look still for long somewhere here. There seems to be a bullish sentiment going on the the AUD USD. Why? Because the moving averages are still aligned and they're bullishly pointed up. So there's that upside momentum in play. But some retracement is occurring. So yeah, I would wait for that retracement to happen. If it does happen and we bounce off the daily pivot, that could be an interesting long for upside. Obviously, there are some trend lines here that are stopping price potentially from continuing. That's why we see that resistance kick in. But there's also a support line like this, and that could be a good line for a bounce too. So there's another confluence regarding trend lines at the daily pivot for a bounce at that spot. So that could be a good bottom of the trend channel. Otherwise, let's take a look at Kiwi now. We have maybe a trend line like this. No, this doesn't look too great actually. So that, yeah, we could cut it maybe like this a bit, but it's pushing it. You know, I don't like to cut a top like that with a trend line personally. So that is a bit of a not an optimal setting right there. Same like the AUD USD. Looks bullishly aligned, but price is making a retracement. It made a shooting star here too. So right there. So will price make that retracement and bounce off the daily pivot point? That could be interesting long, just like the AUD USD, I would say. Anything else to discuss? Well, obviously, a break below the weekly pivot and these two bottoms would mark a bearish turnaround. the moment doesn't seem likely maybe, but just to keep an eye on that. If we do get a bullish breakout, be careful of the monthly pivot there. Together with the weekly R1, that could be a resistance spot together with this top right there on the left. So that's something to be cautious of when we do get a breakout to the upside. Alrighty. Dollar CAD. Let's see. Looks a bit like a falling wedge, in fact. So that falling wedges, of course, are reversal patterns. When you put two trend lines on, and one of them is steeper than the other, and the other is shallower, obviously, then that is a potential reversal pattern like this. For instance, the top one is steep, the shallow one, the bottom one is shallow. That is a potential falling wedge. So that is a reversal sign. So maybe this dollar can get some strength against the CAD. But if you look at the pivot points, they're all intertwined. They're all very close to each other. There's no not really a winner at the moment. So I'd be not interested in the dollar CAD at the moment. Dollar yen, there's a good trend line here. When you connect the tops, the break of that trend line could be interesting. Up to 103, I like that potential. In fact, that makes sense to me. So that's something we can keep on the watch list for upside. Good trend line. What are characteristics of good trend lines? They have a decent angle, preferably something that around 30 degrees maybe. Now obviously if it's 28, it's nothing wrong with it, but just an idea. If it's too shallow, it's maybe difficult to trade, especially on a higher time frame. If it's shallow, it's easier to trade on the lower time frame. The angle of about 30, let's say 20, 15 up to 40 degrees is a bit better. If it gets more, then it's getting steeper and it's more difficult to trade a break, because if the trend line is steeper than that, then basically the momentum could be to the opposite side. So that's the danger of trading trend line breaks against the angle. If the angle is too steep, then that means the momentum is to the opposite side. If the angle is very steep to the downside and the price is moving up, then trading it to the upside upon the break is risky because the trend line is so steep. Something like this, for instance. Right? And you put a trend line on top, and you trade this break. You know, it's risky because price could just move a bit, hit the resistance, and fly down and continue with that momentum to the downside. Other things are, you know, a good number of hits, for instance. That's always useful. Preferably hits that are touching the line. You can cut through some wicks, it's okay, or you can even cut through part of a candle. Of course, the less you cut through, the better. If you cut through a candle, then preferably not through the entire candle. I mean, preferably not have the entire candle outside of the line. Preferably cut only through part of the candle. If an entire set of candles is above the line or below it, in this case above it, right, we don't have anything above it, but let's say there are candles above it, then that would not be that much. It would not be a trend line I would like to have or use. Let's see. Adrian is saying there's a bigger support line. Maybe if you connected these bottoms like this, maybe that's what Adrian is saying. So that could make sense. I'm not a big fan of using. Okay. Let's take a look at the 4-hour. Oh yeah, that looks different indeed. Yeah, that's a perfect one. Either like this, or we could just leave it like that at the moment. Yeah, that's a very nice one. This is nice because it's a good angle, good number of hits, only just a tad, I mean a microscopic part of the wick is out, which is okay, that's perfect. 3 hits at the moment, so yeah, that's very nice. So thanks for that addition, Adrian. And in that regard, we're in a triangle, so break to the opposite, both sides could happen. Considering the fact that we're already at daily S2, We have to see how much space there is left to the downside. Looks like upside might get a bounce here at the L5 and DS2. The thing I personally don't like about it is that the weekly is still above it and the daily is so close above it. So to me personally, although I can understand your trade idea, certainly, I would be rather shopping and hunting for other setups that don't have that resistance so close by. I would like it though above the daily pivot point, but I'm not sure if that will happen today necessarily, but that would be nice because then the resistance is more out of the way. Yeah, that's about it, I guess, at the moment. So, Euro yen. A lot of momentum to the outside. I don't see any trend lines here, maybe necessarily. Let's take a look at the 4-hour chart. Well, one could always put a trend line on the bottoms here, of course, and price is right at that. But we'll have to see if price indeed bounces off that trend line. It could be, then it's a pretty good trend line. We also have a resistance line like this. That could be a bear flag correction of this downside. You can clearly see downside here. This is pretty slow, so that could happen. But the only confirmation of that will be a break below orange, of course. Otherwise, there's a lot of momentum to the downside. Pivot points are above it. Yeah, if price gets up to those levels, that could be a very interesting shorting area. You can already see the potential. With that many resistances, an ATR projected high, the monthly, the daily, the weekly, the H3, that could be quite an interesting zone to look for hourly price action signals of a bounce at that level for some downside. That looks very appealing already right here, right now. That would be good to look for. Otherwise, the momentum is certainly to the downside. But here too, it looks like we're rounding, in fact. So it looks like we're going to get some upside correction. And the pound yen looks to be the same situation, in fact. It's too close to support and it's too close to resistance like this. Could the yen be a bit different than the other yens? Let's take a look. It is a bit different because we have the weekly and monthly pivot below it. So this is looking more bullish because price has already broken through it. Also, if you look at the moving averages on the odd yen and compare them to the euro yen, obviously there's a big difference. The euro yen is a mix, and the odd yen is certainly very bullishly lined up here. So, plus the pivots are below it, this is looking more bullish to me. And if you look at the odd yen, we have a very strong hourly push at at the daily. We haven't broken through it, but it looks like we're going to try to push right here, right now. So in that regard, this is looking like a potential breakout to the upside with a lot of momentum riding behind it. Let's take a look here. So the 15-minute chart is not, aligned with that momentum as yet. These still need a crossover. But obviously a break above the daily pivot point, and there could be a lot of space for more upside. 96.20 is where we have the first weekly R1s and monthly R1s. So, or 96.10, 96.20, there could be that potential breakout Not a lot of space actually if you look at the number. This looks bigger than it is in terms of pips, so maybe not that much. But there is a potential breakout possible there. Yeah, we got divergence on the 15-minute chart, single divergence indeed. So that could lead to some correction. We don't have it on the hourly, so probably a correction, if you look at it from that perspective, will not be too much, but hopefully it will get to our daily or weekly pivot point. That would be very sweet. Pound odd has been in a great trend to the downside, although it has its choppy moments. Then again, it did fall regularly to the downside, maybe not with a lot of momentum, but certainly has that downside angle. If you look at the moving averages, clearly both of them are red in most cases, so there's definitely a downtrend occurring on this pound odd, and every time price moved back to those moving averages, we had pretty good potentials and candlestick patterns, like these haramis here, shooting star and engulfing candles. That, it's a good way of looking at using moving averages and price action and candlesticks basically to find candlestick patterns at moving averages could be very useful. So with that said, we also have, of course, great trend lines. Let's see, like this. Oh. I clicked maybe too many times on that harami. Moved that by accident, so I froze my own charts. But anyhow, you can see maybe the pattern of a bit of a falling wedge because of the fact that that trend line that I wanted to move is coming in pretty shallow and the top line is steeper. So you can maybe see what I mean with the potential falling wedge like this. That's the one I wanted to draw on the chart. Like that and like this. So let me restart that. It's very hot weather here, 34 degrees, 35. It's not easy to focus when it's that hot, especially if you're under a roof. Whew, that doesn't help. Let's see. We were talking about actually something else. This pound odd. We go there. There it is. So this is the lines I wanted to put on. Somehow they disappeared. I don't know why. This one and this one, like that. Looks a bit like a falling wedge, but still, recently there's still plenty of momentum left. All the pivots are above it, so it looks very much like a bullish bearish break in that regard. And yeah, we already had one, in fact, right here. That was this morning. So if you took that break, great job, but be careful because the news event is coming soon. Let's move on. I had extra lines here. Those extra lines are Ichimoku Tenkin and Kiwi lines. I was just playing around with them yesterday for the fun to see how what kind of value they have. They're pretty interesting levels. Take a look at that. We also had a webinar on this topic. I think it was a while ago, but so those are other interesting things. But regarding the Euro at the moment, we do have divergence between the bottoms. It's only single though. Obviously, there's a lot of momentum to the downside. Euro is falling like a brick, and those were good breakout trades. I had one here at the very top, as a pullback, I had a breakout trade somewhere in here. So there's a lot of momentum follow through on that. So that's good. So, but anyhow, yesterday there was a good trendline break like this for those that were trading maybe the, what was it, Monday, very early, I think. Yep, very early Monday. Maybe you took that break. That was a pretty good one. Otherwise, a lot of bearish momentum. The question is only when could we expect a bit more retracement? If we do get a retracement back to the daily pivot point, for instance, and see a bounce at that level, then that would be a great signal for more downside. Otherwise, if we don't do it and we break below the L3, then that could be interesting. But I would monitor that breakout very carefully, because if that breakout doesn't get followed through, then it might be a bit risky. But it could be worth it to give it at least a try, but then exit quickly if it doesn't go the desired direction, which is down, obviously. So the Euro-AUD breakout could be interesting below here, below the L3. There's a lot of momentum riding it to the downside. Look at these gaps between the moving averages here. The same for the hourly. We had a trendline break here already. At the moment, we can't draw really necessarily a trendline at the moment recently, because price has just been falling and falling and falling. So let me answer two questions. Darshan and David's questions. Good morning. And the Eurodollar, I think the difference there is this daily candle. That's a pretty strong candle. Big wick, bullish close. So that could be a retracement of that candle. Plus, if you look at the weekly candle, we have a pretty strong wick at the bottom and a bullish close as well. Who knows, but this is looking like bullish potential to me. Or maybe you meant it the other side. Let me take a look. I'm not sure in which direction you actually meant it. You probably, not sure, pound is cracking. You probably meant to the downside. But I'm not 100% sure. But let's see. Recently, price moved up, failed, and then started to move down. So, yeah, if you're looking for downside, that could be difficult maybe with the Euro-Dollar. I was thinking because of the weekly and daily candle. Price is now back to the 50. So let's see if it could follow through, maybe below the 61.8 and L3 area right here, we could maybe see that break to the downside. Otherwise, let's see. David's question: are the indicators that we use available? Yeah, just send me an email. And otherwise, let me quickly go through all of them again. So Euro-Dollar, interested in upside above the daily and weekly pivot point. Pound-Dollar, interested in shorts below the weekly, personally. AUD-USD, interested in longs from the daily. Let's see, what else? Same for the Kiwi, I think. Yes. Dollar CAD, not interesting. Dollar Yen, yes, but above. I lost all my trend lines. That's a pity. If that freeze. Dollar Yen above the Dollar Yen. And Euro Yen at the pivot points for more downside. Dollar Yen above the pivot points. That doesn't really match up, though, if you look at that. So I have to be maybe careful with that, because these two don't match up. But they both have yen. So let's see. Pound Yen. Nothing. AUD Yen, upside break potential. and I would say euro odd downside break potential below L3, or a bounce from the daily pivot to the downside. So everything seems, at least semi decently interesting, except the dollar CAD and the pound odd at the moment, and the pound yen probably. So let's see how that goes. How about something else? EuroCAD is very wacky because of this up and down. Pound CAD looks a bit quieter. The EuroCAD, of course, that up and down was from the news event, from the interest rate event, obviously. That was causing that huge spike up and down. The pound CAD doesn't seem to have a very reliable trend going on. Prices go sideways since beginning of this year, and hasn't been able to box out to either direction, in fact. Pivot points are very close to each other. Would not be interested in the pound CAD, right? These pivot points are right, price is right in the smack in the middle of those pivot points. So it's a bit difficult to say what the direction here is, and if prices are going to use that as support or resistance. Good momentum to the downside, if you look at the moving averages at least. How about our trend lines? You can easily draw a trend line at the top of these. That looks about it at the moment. There doesn't seem to be a ton of space on this Euro New Zealand. Not big a fan of it. Let's see, Pound New Zealand. So this is looking bearishly aligned. The momentum is down. One could draw a trend line maybe like this and say, okay, the break has happened. So that, of course, was already in the past, which we cannot trade anymore. But the price might easily continue. Yeah, so I would take a look at this bottom here on the 50-minute chart. If that breaks, we could see maybe some follow through on this Pound New Zealand to the downside. The only thing is we have a news event, of course, close by. You can see the ATR projected low is quite low. There's some space maybe to the downside, but I would wait for the news event to finish. The Atlas Missy looks very choppy to me. This is the Pound Swissy. Pound Swissy lost its upside momentum on the 15, still has it on the hourly. New Zealand yen, let's take a look. New Zealand yen has a monthly pivot close by. The odd yen looked better to me than the New Zealand yen. We can take a look at the odd New Zealand too to see how they are aligned. Looks a bit more bullish, slightly, over the 4-hour. That's bullishly aligned. 15 is a mix, so it looks a bit more bullish. Yeah, so ASEAN looks better than New Zealand to me. New Zealand has that pivot point, monthly pivot point close by. The ASEAN only the daily. So that looks differently structure-wise. How about gold? Gold is actually moving up at the moment. Getting some rebound from that bottom there. How much is the question before we might see another fall? Let's see. One way of doing that, of course, is always a fib from top to bottom and looking if price can indeed turn around from the 38 to fib or the 50. So now we're getting into more exotic cross pairs, still tradable, but definitely not the standard ones. So be aware of that. This is the odds. We see a lot of momentum to the downside, to the upside. Sorry. So that could be interesting to keep a look on the break of that H3. A candle close, for instance, above that H3 would probably signal the bulls in control and a potential breakout above that level. Any particular exotics that you might find interesting yourself? I didn't look at them, all of them this morning. I looked at many, but I can't remember exactly which ones. Or maybe I wrote it down somewhere. One second. Let's see. Let me see if I can find this one. The odd cat. I had the odd cat on my watch list too. Let me take a look why. Once again, if you have other currency pairs in mind, let me know. You can see that price is above the daily pivot point. That's one thing. And the weekly and monthly are below it. We are getting a crossover at the moment as we speak. The 15-minute chart is already bullishly aligned, and the 4-hour probably too. So that's why I found it interesting. We also had a harami on the 4-hour chart right there. So it's looking like a potential for a bounce. Also, we know that the ASEAN has potential. So this Aussie is seemingly getting some strength here with the harami, with the bullish moving averages, and price above the daily, weekly and monthly way below it. So this configuration is looking bullish because of those items. Daily chart is not showing a lot of strength because there's two wicks there. The weekly chart is because we got two strong bullish candles. So that could be worth taking a look at how price breaks through this H3. If there's a good close above it, that might be interesting. The ATR projected high and H5 is about 102.50, 102.45-ish. Also, they are 2. So that could be worth it. The other way, of course, of looking at it is that we're also pretty close to this level. One way is letting it hit, letting it pull back, taking the pullback for it up to move up to R2. That's probably space-wise the most spacious. So, time for questions. Let's see. Do you know if there are any percentage chances of breakout from like wedge bull flag will be good or made? Okay, not 100% sure what the question is, but if I understand it correctly, you want to know the percentage of a successful breakout from a bull flag, if I understand correctly. I think it all depends. No, I don't have exact figures regarding all breakouts, but I do think that from a price action point of view, if you have a candle close that is near the high, or if you have a candle close that's far from the high or low, in fact, doesn't matter, it does, I think, do a decent job of filtering out some bad breaks. Not necessarily if a wick is breaking through the trend line, does that equal a bad trade. But I do think there's some advantage of looking at how the break indeed looks like. A good break increases that likelihood of a breakout, of a good breakout. Alrighty, so let me take a look at them again, see if New Zealand yen does have, I mean, just going back to Sylvia's remark there, I mean, it has a good trend line. I'm not saying that. So I can see your point. We're also breaking the monthly if it breaks above it. So that could be interesting, a break above that level. Just thought that Yan was more interesting, but it does make sense from that regard. The only thing is that the R2 and the projected high are relatively close to each other. So maybe not a lot of space upon the break of that orange line, but at least a bit, but not a lot of space. The RUSD, let's see how far it can go. Good question. Well, I guess technically maybe it could go 1 or 2 pips above it, but getting 2 there I think seems pretty likely now. We stopped at the minus 272, made 2 pullbacks, now pushing above the minus 272, so there seems to be space up to 94 at the moment. Yeah, so that seems pretty decent probability indeed. On New Zealand might be something worth taking a look at. Let's see. Pound New Zealand getting close to that bottom that we talked about, but it hasn't broken yet. Gillen is asking about the AUSD if we could wait above 94.50. Yeah, I would think so. I don't know exactly, of course, what you want to do there. 94.50 would mean that we're right at this high. It's about the same level as that. So I'm not sure why 94.50. Then maybe you might as well make it 94.50 or 94.60 because that's this top here. But it depends how you want to tackle it. I mean, if price does break above this top and this target, we do have the potential for, I would say, for upside continuation and follow-throughs with its ups and downs. So that, it's a bit difficult to say exactly because I'm not sure what you're looking for, but roughly yes. Let's see. Sylvia is asking about the yen, probably the dollar yen then. And no, probably not, in fact. Maybe it's the odd yen? Yes. Yeah, it's tight indeed. It could only be a 15-minute breakout, for instance, or an hourly maybe. Then there could be enough space, but not if you look at the 4-hour chart indeed. If you take a 4-hour entry. Otherwise, let's see, 96.20. The bottom here is at 95.60. It's tight, but there's still some space. It's not very wide. It's not wide open though, indeed. But it's open enough to not to have to necessarily skip it because of that, in my opinion. But it all depends, of course, how you have your own plan as well. If you got to be a bit more cautious, there's nothing wrong with skipping this one. Indeed, if you don't like this particular bounce, there's nothing wrong with that. Any other questions? Maybe you got a lot of questions today. That's great. Happy to hear that. Otherwise, let's take a quick look. At all the currencies here, see if we missed anything. The only questionable thing about this odd yen is also the fact that the dollar yen is now pushing through a bit of that support level right there. Price is trying to push through that. That makes it less desirable a bit. And euro odd is getting close to breaking that level, so we can keep an eye on that. That will be interesting. We don't have a close as yet, though, below it. So I would like to see how it closes below it. If it's a strong close like this, below that support level, that could indicate a good breakout potential. If the close has a big wick and price is here, this is the wick and price is all the way here, then obviously that's not a good breakout and that makes things more riskier. So that's something you definitely want to be careful of, okay, with the euro odd downside, especially because there's divergence between those bottoms. Otherwise, great trade from all these breaks to the downside. Beautifully traded that. There's a lot of pips and potential scale-ins as well. Well, I think I've gone through everything. I don't want to keep everyone here necessarily. So logically, everyone has busy things. Everyone has a lot of things to do. So really, I don't have anything necessarily to add at the top of my head. There are a couple of pairs that are not interesting. Otherwise, there are a lot of pairs that have potentials, I would say. I'm looking for price to position itself into a spot that makes it a bit more interesting to trade. Whether that will happen, I don't know. Time will tell. Whether price will make that retracement or breakthrough that I'm looking for. But I try to go through all the pairs here with trend lines, moving averages, pivot points, oscillator in mind, fibs, to show where I would do what. So otherwise I have nothing really to add to that. We can, of course, keep an eye on it, but anyhow, the pound news is coming soon, so I don't think there's a big chance of maybe a trade right here, right now. Kayla is asking about CAD Swiss. Let's take a look. Can't find it. Hmm. One second, I was just quickly writing make. Make the best is to write me, because then right away have a reminder that I promised to write you. Otherwise, I'm scared I would forget it. So that's always the best, to write me quickly. Doesn't have to be a long email. Just there it is. Thanks, Caitlin. So let's put on the template quickly. Well, Adrian is asking about the profitability. The ATRs and pivot points is something that I'm actually using more as a confluence. I've always used it. The ATR is something actually totally new for me. I'm just using it to see how it, if it will provide any extra value for me. If it doesn't, then I might remove it. So that's more of like a experimental phase. So I have it on just to see for indicational purposes only. Camarilla and Pivot Point I do use more in the webinars nowadays, because I used to do it separately, but it's something that I've always used. It's just now maybe it becomes a bit more obvious in the webinars. I try to keep it more separate so it's not all too confusing at once. That's what I was thinking. It could be maybe too much info on the charts, which I still think it could at the moment. But anyhow, a lot of you have been here regularly, so I think that makes more sense to combine more of these things together. Regarding the profitability, actually, for me, let's see, April was a difficult month. I actually had a not so good month. Last month was a bit short because I had holidays, and it was a bit of profit, but not a lot. So I hope that this month is going better already, though. That's good. March was better for me. February too. January was even. So if it's better, I don't remember. I think last year was actually better than this year for me. Let's see, this cat Swissy. Well, we have pivot points, all the pivot points below it. That is good. We have very strong momentum. Let's see. Okay, that's supposed to be. Yeah, I would say it's a decent chance of a breakout. If you just look at the momentum of the hourly, it's quite a lot. The 15 is maybe not ideally set up. We have all the pivot points below us, so we can see how price reacts to this break right in here. If it closes with a good close near the high, for instance, on the 15, we could maybe see some breakouts to the upside. Not a lot of space, so I would definitely be pretty strict on that trade management rule. Alrighty, folks, any other questions? Let me see if I missed any questions. I see one from Ramesh. One second. In general, though, getting back to Adrian's question, I do think that it's a good thing to look at pivot points, definitely. ATR I have to still discover, but the pivot points certainly, because I think it's a great tool to use price action, candlestick patterns at those levels. I think it's a good way to have an idea which breakout trades could be good regarding moving averages or trend lines. So I think they make a lot of sense. Momentum is very good to trade using moving averages. So I like this combination of moving averages and pivot points. It's definitely something I encourage others to use. I find a very nice combination. Kato was saying 82, long at 82.10. Yeah, that would be interesting because you got a lot of confluence here at these levels. I like that idea. That makes sense to me. I would probably look for some 15-minute candlestick pattern there as a confirmation, and that looks good to me. I would agree, definitely. All right, Ramesh is asking where he can get the replays. One second. The video archive. So with that said, we could take a look what kind of webinars we have this week. We had yesterday Nana talking. Tomorrow we will have, let's see, Forex strategy, of course, and Nana's going to talk about the Camarilla. And on Thursday we have another live trading lab plus what news to trade. So we still have 4 webinars left. 2 have been already completed. So we got Forex strategy is the next one, in fact. Tomorrow morning, same time, same place. Alrighty, if there are not any questions left, then thanks for spending your time, of course, with me. Let's see if we get some good setups throughout the day. Watch out for the pound news 35 minutes from now. Otherwise, after that, I'm interested in these bounces or breaks according to candlesticks and moving averages, as I said already in this webinar. So let's see how that pans out. Tomorrow we can review those things as well when we have a bit more time after we finish the analysis. See you soon. I wish you good trading. Cheers.